Hi everyone, I'm Jim Tolles. I'm a spiritual teacher, as many of you know. I blog regularly at spiritualawakeningprocess.com, and of course, I do these videos here on my Jim Tolles YouTube channel. Today I want to talk about suffering and how suffering is grace. Before getting into this topic, just a quick reminder that I have more links and resources down below. I have an ebook, I have a way you can donate to support this channel, my work, and yeah, there's lots of good stuff. And I hope you take a few minutes to check it out after this video. Suffering is grace. This is something a lot of spiritual teachers talk about, so I might as well talk about it as well. And it's very simply understanding what motivates a human being. That when we are in discomfort of some kind, we like to change. When we are comfortable, we don't like to change. And that's it. That's really kind of the essence of why suffering becomes such a powerful grace, because most people, not everyone, but most, will not change anything, will not look within themselves in any sort of serious way unless there is this push to change. I do want to make a distinction between pain and suffering. Pain is like stubbing your toe. Suffering is your response to stubbing your toe. Certainly we can create prolonged pains, physical pains and other sorts of emotional pains, by poor reactions. So if we are constantly worrying about something, pretty soon our bodies and our hearts and our heads are all kind of perpetuating that, even if we're not actively worried about something. So we can get ourselves stuck into all sorts of what I call negative feedback loops. And that sort of pain can go away, and people, and maybe you're one of them, have experienced that when you let go of the ego after a certain kind of grinding away of these old negative feedback loops, things rebalance themselves and you don't have the same sorts of pains that you were having before. But otherwise, there is always pain in human life. Suffering, however, is optional, and we want to understand how we choose our reactions. Most of our reactions and the way we look at life and how we filter life come through a whole lot of unconscious beliefs and assumptions and past experiences and all sorts of associations. And it goes on so effortlessly, although there is quite a bit of actual effort going on, and we realize that as we become more aware. But we do it so well that we don't realize we do it. And so we immediately assume that our perspectives are correct and that our emotions are correct. So all this stuff becomes effectively invisible. And if we have more people telling us that our perspectives are correct, and it's not usually the case that that's true, it's just we like to share our illusion with each other because illusion needs constant reinforcement. But if we get enough feedback that, oh yes, this is true about me, then we further feel solidified in our ideas about who we are and what's going on. One of the interesting moments that happens for many people on the spiritual path is you find out you're wrong about yourself. But that comes later. That usually comes after the suffering. So it's the suffering that's going to get most people started. It's not to say that suffering is grace, is suffering is enjoyable. No, it's not enjoyable. It's motivating. And that's really the thing that I think is so important to appreciate, is that we need motivation to find the truth. If we're comfortable, if life is even going within certain levels of suffering that we're willing to accept, because we are willing to accept a certain amount of suffering so long as it's familiar. We have this interesting way of wanting familiar things more than anything that could be unknown. And so familiar misery is a very real thing. And so the suffering isn't enough yet. And of course, if that misery gets a little bit less, we feel more confirmed in whatever we're doing, and we just kind of stay in those patterns. One of the things that we learn as we grow in the spiritual path is that all of human life is change. whatever experiences we have kind of come and go. And so we try not to grab onto a human experience. We learn to surrender. But in surrendering, we begin to see how often we're choosing to suffer in different ways. And we don't just suffer from like fears and depressions and anger and these types of things, but we also suffer our desires. Our desires to say, I want something else now. I want the future to be like this. I want this, or I want the past to be different than it is. Like all these different ways that we impose our ideas onto life. And then we react to the fact that life isn't actually the way that we think that it is. And that causes suffering, but it has to cause enough. It has to cause enough to get us through certain important hurdles. And one of those hurdles is to let go enough and to see just enough to start to realize how trapped we are. Like that's actually really, really important. This is a problem for a lot of people because they think when they get to that point that they may have done something wrong, they're like, wow, I'm in a lot of suffering. I must be doing something wrong on the spiritual path. But no, what's happened is now you are aware. Ignorance is powerful. It's one of our most powerful things that keeps us stuck in suffering, is the very belief that we aren't. And it's ridiculously hard to convince somebody who's immersed in that illusion of ignorance of their suffering. You can point to it again and again. And some of you have had this with other people talking to you about relationships you're in or vice versa, or jobs you're in or vice versa, where it's like you can clearly see this person doesn't want to be in this job. And they keep suffering and suffering. And in this scenario, let's just assume that this person has the ability to go to other jobs. There's other opportunities. I know not everybody has the same work environments and opportunities. That's a whole other topic. But just think of any situation that is actually changeable. Although our ego likes to run in and tell us a whole lot of things aren't changeable too. And so that kind of adds to the misery. It's like being ignorant and then saying we can't change anything and not being willing to look at ourselves. Or continuing to blame other things for not being what they should be. And just there's so many different ego tactics, ego tricks that we use to barter, deny, ignore, and so on and so forth. And that's why suffering has to be powerful enough to push you through, to make you do something to see a little bit more. And then you start to see a little bit more, and then it's hoped that you get to that point of seeing where you realize, wow, I do need to do something. I have to find a way to get free of suffering. And then after that, there's this other point where you drop something enough where you start to really feel what it's like to let go in a significant way. It has to be a significant way, not just some sort of small little respite, like in a serious way. Something drops like, whoa, I'm no longer holding on to the loss of my grandparent. Wow, I didn't realize how much I was holding that grief. I didn't realize how that infiltrated all my interactions with older people. Right? These types of things happen very regularly for people who are serious about the spiritual path. And after a point like that, that tends to be a turning point, because what happens is some part turns within more. And that part that's turning within more says, what else don't I know? And I want to know. So where that earlier point where you start to see more, that tends to be a place where a lot of people turn back, say, well, no, I don't want to deal with that. That it looks like a lot of crap. And I don't want to believe that's there still. And so I'm going to try and deny it and go back to ignorance. But when you've dropped something and you've not only realized that you had an issue, but that you could let it go and that you're feeling more free for it, that inspires you to go further. And so this starts a cycle for most people. Not everyone, but for most, until they hit a wall that's too hard and they want to come back from it, which is possible. Each issue and each level of attachment that we have to different things asks different things of us, and we all kind of have our different places where the old ego comes back stronger again. It can go for 5 or 10 years, and then you hit this hard wall around relationships, and you'd worked on so many other things and let so many other things go. And then there's this part of the ego that says, no more, I'm done. And that can happen. But further along still, There are points as you continue to drop and to dissolve ego and to feel yourself coming more and more into a space where you're just at peace with what is, that you truly realize and sense that suffering has been a profound grace, that you are only here because your suffering forced you to see things that your ego didn't want to see, to hear things that your ego did not want to hear. And when you arrive at that point, this is an even deeper turning point. To see that suffering is grace, the way you look at suffering in others, in other people, and what it even means to help support others and alleviate suffering for others, dramatically changes. And it takes you to a new space on your spiritual path to freedom. Let me know if you have any questions about this topic. And feel free to check out those resources down below that I mentioned earlier. Thanks for watching.